Hey everyone, Kyle once again, and welcome back to... Sorry, once again about the squeaky chair. Welcome back to the next movie review, and reviewing on the next fun comedy film. Since I did a film with Robin Williams, now I'm going to do a film that stars both great comedians I've always enjoyed, Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy. So the film that they star together, which is of the 1999 comedy film Bowfinger. So yeah, the first time you see two great comedic actors, Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy, star in a film together. So Bowfinger from 1999, and it was directed by Frank Oz, who directed Little Shop of Horrors, which is one of the very few musicals I like. Which also has Steve Martin in it as the evil dentist, and Rick Moranis as well. And he also directed the comedy film What About Bob with Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. And he also directed what was that? It was that that kind of like that action thriller film was called. It starred Robert De Niro and Edward Norton. It wasn't Spy Game. That was the Tony Scott film. Give me a second here. Yeah, I know. I probably should have done this before I... The Score, that's what it was. The Score. Yeah. It was with Edward Norton and Robert De Niro. He also directed House Sitter, The Dark Crystal, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, also with Steve Martin. The Indian in the Cupboard, which I reviewed long ago, though. And he also directed the 2007 original Death at a Funeral, which would 3 years later be remade. So, but he also directed also In and Out, also with Kevin Kline. As I said, What About Bob? House Sitter, also with Steve Martin, and The Muppets Take Manhattan as well. But I think this Frank Oz was a capable director, though. So yeah, it was The Score I was thinking about. But I enjoy this film. I always had fun with the film. I thought Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy, they work really well together. They're both funny. They're both entertaining. I got laughs at both of them. Yeah, you get and Steve Martin, of course. I always enjoy Steve Martin. I mean, even my dad, even back in the day when he would appear on SNL, like, these two crazy guys, as the brothers from, what was that country from Russia, Czechoslovakia or something like that. It was something like that, but, with what he would do along with Dan Aykroyd, it was so funny to see him, even on film, like, I always enjoy him from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Of course, this film, The Jerk. I haven't seen Father and the Bride in quite a while. But a lot of times, with Steve Martin appear, it's always nice to see him. Oh, of course, The Three Amigos. I always enjoyed Three Amigos. But always enjoy Steve Martin. He's just such a great comedic actor, and he had to work along with Eddie Murphy, which I always enjoyed. Now, of course, during this time in the '90s, I wasn't really big on some of the films that he was doing during the time in the '90s. I mean, I wasn't really big on The Nutty Professor. I really wasn't. Nor was I big on Dr. Dolittle. But that film was a hit, though. Yeah, I wasn't really big on Doctor Dolittle or there was another film he did was called Holy Man, and then afterwards he go and do Adventures of Pluto Nash. That was considered one of the biggest flops of all time. So between Metro, I actually like Metro. That's kind of a pretty good one with Eddie Murphy, but I wasn't really big on the choice he was doing it in the mid '90s and then the early 2000s. But Bowfinger, some people could say it's one of his more unappreciated movies, which I can understand. And they both worked. Like I said, they both worked well together. And amongst the cast, you have Heather Graham, who in this she's an upcoming star. You have Terence Stamp, the original General Zod from Christopher Reeve's Superman. Jamie Kennedy, he appears it as the camera. He's the cameraman. Jamie Kennedy played Randy from Scream, among other movies, though. And then Robert Downey Jr. Yes, Robert Downey Jr. years before Iron Man. He only appears only a few scenes, but it's nice. But it's nice to see Robert Downey Jr. in there. He's like the higher up rankings in Hollywood, and he's the one who gives Steve Martin the green light to make this movie he's gonna do. But it's always nice to see Robert Downey Jr. So, and the film came out. It wasn't that big of a hit. It cost about $55 million. It made like 60-some million in the U.S. and worldwide about $98 million. So you can say it may be kind of like a sleeper hit, but it wasn't as big as a breakthrough as studios thought it would be. But regardless, I still enjoy the film. And so the film in the film is Steve Martin. He's like one of the least popular directors in Hollywood because he's directed one bad and another, but he thinks this is the one movie that's gonna make it that may make it or break it for him. And it's called Chubby Rain, to do with aliens and stuff, right? And so he wants to hire this one of Hollywood's biggest stars named Kit Ramsey, and that's played by Eddie Murphy. He goes to the scriptwriter and he gives it to Robert Downey Jr. If you get Kit Ramsey, I'll greenlight the movie, which he does. And like Jamie Kennedy, he's kind of like more. We don't see he's a cameraman, but he kind of like we don't see much of his comedic side to him. He's kind of like being more of the straightforward to Eddie Murphy, more reasonable person, which is too bad because I like Jamie Kennedy. Of course, like I said, from the Scream movies, they killed him off in Scream 2. And yet he predicted he would be about the whole 3 thing. We made the video about himself in Scream 3. Of course, Son of the Mask, we all know what that is, right? So, but it's nice to see Jamie Kennedy though, and then it began with Kit Ramsey, played by Eddie Murphy. Supposed to be this big star. Heather Graham is being this upcoming star. The nitpick I have with this film, I'm not really big on her character. I mean, it's not like Heather Graham was bad acting wise. I just really wasn't interested in her character. The only times which it would be funny with her in it because she's interacting with Eddie Murphy or Steve Martin, and that's funny because of either both of them, not with Heather Graham, but she's really funny when it's involved with both of them. So I really wasn't really interested in her character though, but I mean she didn't do that bad of a job though, which is I wasn't care about her character. So, shit. And so where was I at? And so they wanted and with Kit Ramsey, he's kind of like this. He's kind of like a little bit of a paranoid guy who believes about aliens and stuff like that, or Scientology. And so one of the things I liked about the movie, I think the big reason why I liked the movie because I like the idea behind it. That he doesn't want to do this, but but Steve Martin gets the idea to secretly film Eddie Murphy, right? Like, Eddie Murphy does not know that he's being filmed for the movie. You know, it's kind of like a way like about like the Truman Show with Jim Carrey, like how they film his whole life, right? But this time they film Eddie Murphy, but they just don't tell him about it. And like how he being a paranoid person, like we have a scene where they're gonna see her in the garage where he's walking and he's hearing these footsteps, and which turns out that Eddie Murphy had his dog wear high heels to make the footsteps, and that's wherever he's hearing. But he doesn't know it's the dog wearing the high heels. He just hears the footsteps. So he's kind of like being that kind of a paranoid type of guy, right? And for a way of it, things go well for it. And Eddie Murphy, he does have funny lines, like when he says like, "It's too shareable," or it's too what was it, cerebral? I'm doing this joke crappy though, but it's too shareable. We're trying to make a movie here, not a film. Or so going down here, like it's like okay, it's like the letter K appears in the script more than 1,456 times. That's perfect. That's perfectly divisible. That's perfectly divisible by 3. So what? What are you saying? What I'm saying is KKK appears more in the script more than 486 times. Let's see. Try and find a little more. Yeah, or there's a scene where hit the film like where Heather Graham and Eddie Murphy doing like a little love scene, and then Eddie Murphy just looks at Heather Graham. He's like, "You're gonna be a star." I'm doing a crappy job about it with the lines though, but just check out Bowfinger. You'll find it's much more funnier when I say it though. But the lines with both Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy have are funny. I always got a laugh out of both of them. And then later we one thing leads to another. We get Kit Eddie Murphy. He disappears like with Terence Stamp because he's like more of also a higher up too as well. And then we get introduced to Jeff, who was also played by Eddie Murphy. He's a brother of Kit, and he was always kind of like the person like. He was like the brother that was living within his brother's shadow, basically. And he wants to be popular just like he is, right? And we see how if as with the glasses and the braces, even he's squinting even where he's wearing glasses. And the whole thing what they would do with Jiff, like one scene like they're filming this bridge scene while running across traffic, right? And which they got the scene though. But it's just the whole thing where they film with Jiff, I wish also Jiff would have been the character Jiff of Eddie Murphy would have been appear much more, but it's because of the time Kit when he comes back he was supposed to stay at Terence Stamp's place, but he comes back and he gets thrust in even more crazy situations. So I wish that Jiff could have appeared a little bit more in the movie, and also that what. Like I said, they both worked well together. That's what made it good. Having these two comedians worked well together, Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy. And I know I've been making it short and sweet here, though, but eventually, like when their budget was worth like $2,000, and he's talking with Jamie Kennedy about how can we do with that kind of money? It costs millions of dollars, and Steve Martin's like, well, you're distracted with this and with the studios and what else? Every movie costs $2,000. And by the end, I was like, I'm big and short and sweet though, but they do finish the movie, and like because they do stuff without permission. Like to go, Terence Stamp just like, hey, You do this without permission. We're not giving it to you. And then one thing at least to know that Eddie Murphy, he puts a sack over his head and he ends up exposing himself to like the Lakers cheerleading squad. And then Terence says, "Okay. You can I'll give you permission." And you gotta wonder in the reality of this. In the reality of this film is like that film would bomb because Steve Martin's his career hasn't been that great because he's made like terrible films, which it is a terrible movie. But if in the reality of this film would have flopped. And then afterwards, like Steve Martin gets called to direct this action film with Jiff in this martial arts movie in Taiwan. So, yeah, this is a bit of a more short review though, but I do enjoy the idea that how that Steve Martin wants to film Eddie Murphy without his knowledge, though, just make him thinking like, okay, he's still portraying the character, but he doesn't know these being in the movie, whether it's Kit or with Jiff, right? And it's so very. Because Steve Martin he wrote the movie, so I thought he did very well with the script, and just the idea that they secretly film him without his knowledge, because being the paranoid character he is for Kit, and some of the funny lines of dialogue I thought were funny, and the cast did it very well together. Like I said, Steve Martin working with Eddie Murphy, it was very great to see. The other cast members, like Jamie Kennedy, was nice to see, though. Wish we could see a little more of his comedic side to him. Nice to see Robert Downey Jr. for the little screen time that he had. Always good to see Terence Stamp in there. Heather Graham, like I said, she was not bad in the movie. I just didn't care. She is the least thing in the movie for me. I didn't really care about her character, but she wasn't bad acting-wise. I get where they were going for, so. But regardless, though, like the idea of the film they were like filming the fake films film within a film. I'm trying to say, right? It was kind of like those, seeing the film within the film. And I always wonder how these films turn out. I would like to see those type of movies that they made. I would like to see those. If it was in the reality of this film, they would have flopped because they were not really that great movies. But regardless, though, I other than the least bit was Heather Graham's character, and I wish they would see more of the Jiff character. On that though, it was still a very entertaining movie. It's definitely great to see. Well, I'll say one of the better films from Eddie Murphy. Well, around this time, I would say. I definitely and it's not the first time he portrays a different person, right? Because, well, we got that from freaking Norbit, and we know how now that is, right? And somehow reason that film Norbit got made more money than this movie, which I don't know. I have no idea why. Because we all know how terrible Norbit is, and I think it's Eddie Murphy's worst film he's done. It's his worst film, and he plays different people in that. And here he does he's playing two brothers though, but he's doing different dual roles. Definitely like this a lot better than Norbit. I'll definitely tell you that now. But he did a good job, nonetheless. Eddie Murphy playing the both characters, and so it was great. He got to work with Steve Martin. Always nice to see Steve Martin. It's always a pleasure to see him on there. It was nice to see, like I said, Terence Stamp, Jamie Kennedy, Robert Downey Jr. I think Frank Oz did a good job with the film as well, and the score by David Newman was fine as well. And like I said, I always liked the idea behind the film, and it was very entertaining. It was a very entertaining film. It was very fun, and these two the idea of having these two comedic actors work together for the first time, it was worth it, and I think they did very good. They did a good job together, working together. So yeah. So Bowfinger, which by the way, Bowfinger, that's the name of Steve Martin's character. If anyone wondering, his name is Bowfinger. That's Steve Martin's character. So, but yeah, that's my review for Bowfinger. I give a thumbs up, and if anyone was a fan of Steve Martin or Eddie Murphy, give this a watch. It's still a fun, entertaining movie. I still get laughs out of this. So yeah, so thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next movie review, and we'll see you next time. Later.